Hi everyone. Today's session is the law for accounting. My name's Shazia Khan, and the learning outcome that we'll be doing today is a learning outcome 3, which is to understand the impact of criminal law on business and professional organisations. What I just want to do quickly is just give you an idea of what we did in learning outcome 2, quite quickly. So a summary of what we did in the last session. So we looked at the formation of a company, financing and administration of a company. We looked at the veil of incorporation. We also looked at the procedure for company and limited partnership. We looked at the requirements of Companies Act. We also looked at exemptions of medium, email and micro enterprises. We looked at the directors, officers and shareholders, and insolvency. So now we move on to learning outcome 3. Why do you think when we look at, can you all see the slides? Yeah. Why do you think it's important to understand criminal law in regards to businesses and professional organizations? Why do you think criminal law is so important? Or just looking at law, but then obviously becoming a criminal act, why do you think that's so important?
I think that's important because we have to avoid anti-money laundering.
Anti-money laundering. Anything else, anyone?
If we as well, it's a part of it, but if, for example, it's important as well because we have to identify a person with who we work. So,
okay.
And this is as well criminal law if we are not identifying the person. And
what do you mean identifying the person?
Well, it's like if we do not have a full due diligence for it, like for example, let's say Thomas Smith is saying that he's a Thomas Smith, and you believe that he is Thomas Smith, but in reality he's not a Thomas Smith, and you never ask for his documents, let's say,
to check. So identity checks.
Yeah, exactly. And on the other hand, maybe this Thomas Smith looks like a normal person, but in reality he's a criminal, so we have to check him as well.
Okay, Najam, what do you think?
Health and safety, there are other parts of the regulation, right? Meaning that also, it could be tax is another angle, right? Meaning there is in the financial services sector, there is a piece of statute called corporate criminal offense. If the organization is linked,
sorry, Najam, I'm just going to cut you off a little bit. Do you think AI has an impact on all this criminal situation in regards to any sort of businesses and everything? Do you think it plays a role?
Big time. Yeah. I tell you right now, there is a huge work going on in the asset management financial services sector.
It's
what
huge.
They're calling it ethical AI, right? What we can or cannot use. One of the angles of biggest risk that we are facing as managers, right, is the moment we input the information into an AI, for example, with generative AI, information is not private anymore.
No.
So that's a breach of GDPR, for example. So that's like a breach of law.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other effects.
Yeah. It's playing a big role in a lot of stuff now. I teach at the university and I could see the impact on AI on students. Some students still copy the assignments up to what AI expects, 99%, 100%. So that's done for plagiarism and, collusion. But the fact is, when you come to situations in the real life situations, AI has impacted on the voice recognition. So it could not be you, like, Viola was saying, sometimes you need the ID because it might not be you. It might be someone else. So criminal act, you must have 2 elements of criminal law, and that's, you must have the mens rea and the intent, the mens rea and the actus reus. So the intention and the want to do this. So the intention and the committing of the act, and that's what they do in regard to businesses, because there's a big concern within businesses at the moment, like you said, with the introduction of AI as well. So LO3 indicative context. So we look at the legal principles, legislation, some case law, ethical codes, ethical codes relating to business and professional organizations, such as government guidance, codes issued by professional bodies or specific industries. We look at the status of each law, regulation, guidance, relationship and interaction, corporate governance and ethical practice, malpractice, fraud and bribery, elements of consequences of malpractice, defences against malpractice for professional accountants, elements of consequences of fraud, elements and consequences of bribery, money laundering, national and international regulations relating to money laundering, what constitutes money laundering, so reporting and other requirements for professional accountants in relation to money laundering, consequences of failing to meet money laundering requirements, penalties for money laundering, and computer misuse and cybercrime, Computer Misuse 1919 Act, offences and penalties under the Computer Misuse Act and Cybercrime and Fraud Act. So learning outcomes, 3 criteria. So the first one is 3.1, which is to analyse the relationship between legal principles, legislation, case law and ethical codes. 3.2, to examine the elements, consequences of malpractice, fraud and bribery in business organisation. 3.3, explain offences and penalties related to money laundering. 3.4, explain offences and penalties related to computer misuse and cybercrime. So each of these elements will go through in regards to each one, because when it comes to doing your assignment, it may say, you know, you've covered 3.4, so you need to be looking at that. 3.1, analyse the relationship between legal principles, case law and ethical codes. Ethics are a set of moral principles that guide behaviour. Is it important to have ethical values within an organisation, or is it important? Yeah. And what about an individual? Is it important for them to have ethical values?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can differentiate right versus wrong.
Is that always the case?
The individuals make up the organization, isn't it? So
yeah,
the more individuals are aligned to ethical values and do uphold those values, the organization is safe, because where 1 or 2 individuals in the organizations are very unethical, it brings down the organization.
But Irene, in the real world, in the real world now we're talking, does everyone have ethical values?
Well, to an extent, not everyone, to an extent, you know. So even though why we preach it or we learn it and we adhere to it, not everyone is of the same level, at the same level of ethical conduct.
Yeah. Sorry, what is that?
I said, but it's obviously important for the organization to have those ethical values printed, and consequences of you know, going against such values is very known to all individuals within the organization.
Yeah, so it tends to your moral principle, you know, some people have it, like you said, some people don't, but ethical values are assumptions and beliefs about what you as an individual constitute as what's right and what's wrong. So it is held by both individuals. Now, some individuals hold it more than others, and some hold it less. And the reasoning behind devising ethical codes and a code of conduct is that so people follow it, and also the fact that, you know, you as an individual are able to identify the moral principles, but identify what is right and what is wrong. Because in every organization, every business, something's right and something is wrong. You know, to do a certain thing is right, and then to do a certain thing is wrong. So you within the accountancy sector, things like confidentiality, you know, GDPR, money laundering. So you must abide by the right organizations when you look at dealing with clients. I will be honest with you, I have known accountants that don't you know, have these values in place. And like you said, Irene, you know, there are some that do and some that don't, but I do know some that don't go don't follow the ethical codes and things. Hanish, what do you think about this? I don't really want to be asking you much, if you don't mind, because I think you've got a cold, haven't you, today?
Yeah, it's flu, but
and if I don't ask you anything, it's because I'm not ignoring you or anything, Hanish. I'm just trying to. What do you think about these like moral principles and ethics that you must follow?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, they are crucial.
Yeah.
As you said, you have a moral compass.
Yeah.
So you do have a sense of right and wrong, but it's even in other professions,
Yeah.
you know, cases have been found where professionals are committing crimes or injustice in within the organization or at a personal level. For example, bullying at the office where somebody is qualified, is a chartered accountant, and they bully their colleagues and suppress them into doing the wrong thing. And when the audit comes through, the auditors notice discrepancy. And that professional blames their colleague when in fact it was something that they instructed them to do in order to mislead or misrepresent the financial information.
Yeah, it is. I think ethical code is not just in accountancy, it's in every organization. I worked in law, I practiced law for 12 years. And when I was representing clients, some of the firms I worked for, I will seriously tell you, were disgusting and not following the ethical codes. And that's why they got struck off and shut down, because they weren't following the code of conduct. Money laundering was going on, abuse within the firm was going on, like you just said, you know, suppressing employees. There was no professionalism. So, you know, you move on to different firms and you kind of see which ones have strong moral values and which don't. And it's quite a shock. Objectives of accountancy profession. So the mastering of particular skills and techniques, development of an ethical approach to work, acknowledgement of duties to society, objective outlook, rendering services to the highest standard, so working to the highest standard, and achieving acceptance by the public. So members of professional bodies such as qualified accountants often have codes of ethics to guide them with ethical dilemmas arise. Several codes of ethics have been developed which are broadly similar. A profession is distinguished by certain essential defining characteristics. So the profession, the body of theory and skills, the adherence to common code and values and conduct, and the acceptance of duty to society. Now, when you work within the accountancy profession, why is money laundering? I mean, I know we'll go onto it later on. Why do you think money laundering is so important?
Well, in my opinion, anti-money laundering is important because this is something what helps bad people do criminal thing, tax evasion, hide money or use money, let's say for drug dealers, gun sellers, people traffic and stuff like that. That's everything relevant anti-money laundering and criminal law.
Yeah, so they kind of acquire it through, you know, tax evasion and things, and you know, sometimes it's hidden and sometimes firms are quite strong at doing it, and sometimes I will say in some firms accountants are involved in it, because I've known people that have been struck off because of that, you know, in the law profession, because they was involved in the issues around criminal activity, the actual solicitors themselves. So there's body of theory and skills. So that means technical skills such as auditing, acquired by training and education, an examination system which ensures accountants obtain the knowledge required to act responsibly within their profession, and maintained by continuing professional development, adherence to common code of values and conduct. So this is established by the administrating body, maintains an objective outlook and ethical standards applicable to all members, such as ACCA's codes of conduct, and acceptance of a duty to society. So your profession can be trusted in the public interest, and in return members are granted a qualification and usage. Why do you think it's so important in your profession as an accountant to be trusted in the public interest?
Well, it means that you are regulated by the law, you follow all of the rules and restrictions. It means
What about in the public interest? Why is it so important in the public interest? When we look at ethics and ethical behavior, this diagram identifies why behave ethically. So law, you've said violator, reputation and standing, why to maintain public confidence and public interest.
Yeah, remember public meaning in terms of public companies, I'm just giving an example, is they have effect, right? Meaning they're investing their money into the company, so they expect it to be, run ethically. Yeah, so that's public interest.
They have an expectation from you, don't they?
Yep.
So they have that expectation that you maintain confidence, and everything they put across to you is private as well. So why behave ethically? First one, to avoid conflicts of interest. Secondly, to be objective and act in the public interest.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And thirdly, keep sensitive information confidential. Be straightforward and honest. Maintain professional knowledge, behavior and skills, and act within the spirit of the letter of the law. So, maintain that you follow the law that's in place. Fundamental ethical principles. Integrity. Straightforward, honest implies fair dealing and trustworthiness. Objectivity, uncompromised by bias, conflict of interest, or the undue influence of others, which Violeta mentioned earlier on. Professional competence and due care, again, maintain professional knowledge and skill and act diligently. Confidentiality, refrain from disclosure of confidential information and from using such information for personal advantage. And professional behavior, comply with relevant laws and regulations. Now, confidentiality, when we talk about that, Najim, you mentioned the AI stuff. Do you think we still kind of follow that ethical principle then?
Sorry, say that again, Shazia.
When we talk about AI and confidentiality, do you think we kind of follow that ethical side of it, confidentiality?
Well, we are supposed to. I think obviously there are penalties and fines for not following it. No. Do we follow it all the time? No. Sometimes inadvertent. As I said, generative AI, a lot of people have fallen foul of it. They didn't realize the moment you put the information in, it's not proprietary and therefore fined by the regulators. So I think it's not all.
When we talk about AI, I think it's good for certain things, but I don't think it's good for everything. And I think, there's the issue of confidentiality, privacy, professionalism. AI has come on very quickly into the UK, and the person that adopted it and sort of, kind of developed it has resigned, saying that it's working too fast. I was watching something, a documentary, and there was this man on it, and he was saying that if I had to tell if I got kidnapped, an example, if I didn't get kidnapped, but someone rang me, my mother, and had my same voice through AI system, they could defraud my mother. They could ask for money fraudulently from my mother because they would have my voice, and they would be, able to say that, I've been kidnapped or something, or I'm in trouble. And if someone asks for money, then that's the way that fraud is committed through that. And a lot of AI is developing too quick for this country, I think.
Yeah, and remember the social impact of AI, for example, there was a strike in the Hollywood, for example, for actors and actresses and singers, right? Because AI could frankly do their voice. So they would lose income.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of social impact as well.
Yeah, it's a growing concern, I think.
Yep.
I know it's good for some things, but it's a big growing concern. The conceptual framework. So you have an accountant's code of professional ethics set as a basic problem-solving procedure. So you identify the threat to a fundamental principle, evaluate the threat, apply safeguards. If safeguards cannot be applied, discontinue action or service, and safeguards created by professional legislation or regulations. Why do you think we need safeguards in place?
To stop falling foul of it, right? Meaning
to stop what?
Safeguards are important, right? Meaning sometimes inadvertently becoming a victim of not knowing something. So that's one. Second thing is knowing what you must not do is another part of safeguarding.
Yeah,
right?
knowing what you must not do, and there's still, and I will stress, and I don't know if you lot feel the same, but there's still organisations that do not follow code of professional ethics, and it's not just in accountancy, law. You've got medicine. You've got they don't. I deal with cases all the time, cases of negligence within like a profession such as a doctor. The side where they've dealt with when they've unethically had a relationship with a client, in the law firm. So, these kind of things try to, it makes you try to think about whether, we are following, for me, I think it's really important for a solicitor or a barrister to know their codes of ethics, professional ethics. Because I think
remember,
if you're
conflict of
representing
interest.
a client, sorry?
Is a conflict of interest in our sector is huge, right? In professional services.
But I think when you're representing a client, you need to have your be at a professional manner, and be able to safeguard what you are saying, what you are doing, because you as an individual, and I've seen it in the last 20 years when I've worked in the profession. I've seen the discrepancies. I've worked for firms that I would never even work. I wish I'd never worked for when I started at 16. I mean, like Hanish was saying, he started at 16 at a firm, but he loved it. I kind of started at 16 at a law firm and hated it because I saw the discrepancies when it came to times when it were audits for the law firm. They made people backdate stuff. That's not professionalism. Backdating all your letters and things like that, which is for someone to come into a firm and have that kind of ethics is not right, because they're going to want to do that all the time. So just at times of audits, they were doing, client care letters and backdating stuff, and it was just all unprofessional. So, you need to be working in a good professional firm to appreciate the code of ethics and, follow them as well, because if you don't work in a good firm, be it accountancy, be it a legal profession, you've got to work in a good environment where ethics are the main thing, because I think you can go down that route of thinking I could make more money like that, like you said, money laundering, that is a big concern within these professions. Principles and against rules. So the principle-based approach to ethics encourages case-by-case judgment. Advantages of principle approach: it's quite rigorous and comply with spirit, bigger picture, flexibility for changing circumstances, promotes development of skills and judgment, and creates a culture of ethical awareness, like I just said, encourages personal responsibility. The disadvantage is that it's not easy to find the right answer sometimes, and it may be more than just one course of action, and conflicting interests need to be balanced. The advantages of rules, the approach is clear cut, so it's there, you have to follow it. The correct course of action will be more obvious and it's easier to reinforce, whereas the disadvantages, there are loopholes that can be found. Tick box mentality promoted, have to legislate for every eventuality. New requirements must be developed, and it's too detailed. I've known accountants out there that have not followed, have this approach of, there are so many loopholes we should follow, and they advise clients of that. I've got an accountant and he's really, really old. He's lovely, and he's about 70 years old, ready to retire, and he would never, ever go against what the ethics are. Even you'd kind of mention stuff to him and he'd like, no, he'd say Shazia Beti, he's a Muslim, and he'd say, daughter, this is the right way to go. And he's quite ethical in what his approach is. And he's kind of, do you think it's important when you work for a firm that the ethics that you use in that firm are followed down to, are instilled down to other employees as well?
Yeah, it comes from the top. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think it has an impact?
It has big impact.
Yeah. What do you think, Irene? Do you think it has an impact, or Violeta? Do you think what you're taught from the top has an impact on what you kind of learn?
Yes, it's a sort of like
it's this hierarchy of ethics, isn't it?
Yes,
that follows you down.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think it has a good impact. Sorry, what was that?
Also looking back to your previous slide, principle versus rule, right? Meaning that is regularly debated here in the UK.
Yeah.
The US is a very rule-based society versus principle-based here in the UK. Meaning I sometimes what I see in practice. So in US, you're driving a car, right?
Yeah.
It would have a sign that there is a men at work, right, on the front. If you hit a person, $30,000 fine and 2 years prison.
Oh my.
In UK, there will be these cones miles and miles behind, the workers protecting them. Rather than warning you what the rules are, basically. So principle is don't run over them. US, you can run over them, but you'll end up in jail and $30,000 fine. So again,
I think you should stop running over people, Najam.
Exactly. So there, I think both works. You know what I mean? So it's like rules versus principle, both works. But again, it's like there's very different approaches
there are advantages
to making
of
compliant.
both. There are advantages and disadvantages of both, but they do work, principles and rules. So we've got compliance with the law. There are two categories of UK law. Criminal law that affects the whole community, punishable by fines or imprisonment. Civil law, which relates to conflicts within the community. The concept of punishment does not apply. So within civil law, you'll get compensation or a fine or anything like that. Accountants are often affected by laws which may not be obvious. Health and safety legislation, which Najam talked about earlier a little bit. Employment protection and equality laws. Laws and regulations must be complied with. However, simply complying may not constitute ethical behavior. There are many examples of activities that are legal but not ethical. An accountant's ethical code is not legally enforceable. Penalties are at the discretion of the professional body. They may be subject to other regulations depending on the work they do. So it depends on your ethical codes for the organization. The accountancy professional. You have the International Federation of Accountants, IFAC, international body representing all the major accountancy bodies. The Consultative Committee of Accountancy Bodies, CCAB, has 5 members of 3, ICAEW, ICAS, and ICPFA are sponsored bodies of AAT. And then HM Revenue and Customs, UK Department, which aim to ensure that correct tax is paid at the right time. And the National Crime Agency, NCA's UK body, which tackles serious organised crimes such as Class A drugs, human trafficking, fraud, and money laundering. Has anyone come in line with any organisations? You don't have to mention the name of the organisation that have committed issues around fraud or money laundering.
Well, I have, meaning, again, it was committed by an employee rather than an organization.
Okay.
And he ran it, and he was the credit manager. Imagine he was actually safeguarding the money whilst defrauding the organization. So, yes.
Irene, have you come across any?
Yes. Again, not the organization, but an individual within the payable department, and where the individual, I don't know how he managed to get away with it, because he had the responsibility looking after this area. So you'd expect that he will live up to the values, but rather somehow changing bank accounts. So when payments were made for goods and services received, somehow he got his own arranged accounts in and funneling money into his accounts. It took quite a while for this to be noticed when customers actually kept chasing and pressing for their payments before it was discovered, and by that time he's really gone away with quite a large sum of money. So yes, we've experienced this on an individual level, but not as an organization.
Yes, it's quite I think it's quite interesting when it happens. Not that it's a good thing, but it's quite interesting when you look at what kind of things that person has done to, you know, breach this issue around money laundering or anything. Business ethics and professional values. So the concept of business ethics suggests that businesses are morally responsible for their actions and should be held accountable for the effects of their action on people and society. Key principles, again, which we mentioned: integrity, objectivity, or accountability, openness, and honesty. Organizations usually aim for profit, but the rights of range of external and internal groups relevant to organizations such as stakeholders must be protected. To achieve this, a code of conduct must be developed. Business ethics and professional values. The code of conduct is devised to influence the behavior of employees. It sets out procedures to be used in specific ethical situations. Violations of the code may lead to sanctions by the organization, including termination of employment. A code of practice is adopted by professional or organization. And an example is the AAT Code of Professional Ethics. Steps to create an effective ethical program: active leadership, buy-in from employees, and suitable training. Sustainability and SCR. Accountants have a responsibility to act in public interest and have wider social responsibilities, not just confined to the office environment. Sustainability is to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet all needs. And that was a Brundtland report in UN. Sustainability development is an organization should develop its operation to coexist with society. This can be achieved by putting the long-term future ahead of short-term gains. Corporate social responsibility, CRS. The obligations that a business feels it has to its local community, persons and organizations connected to it, and a society as a whole. Sustainability and financial professions, economical, social, and environmental. Governance, risks, and ethics. Governance is a major issue of directors and managers of many organizations. Its main focus are on ensuring that companies are directed and controlled properly, and that directors can act on behalf of their shareholders. However, any discussion of running companies properly soon enters the realm of ethics and corporate social responsibility, CSR. A number of high-profile corporate failures have highlighted that a key part of running a business lies in controlling risk. Part of the solution to this lies in having an adequate system of internal controls, including an internal audit. 3.2. Explain the elements and consequences of malpractice, fraud, and bribery in business organizations. Corruption includes any illegitimate use of office and may include a range of different types of crime. Bribery is limited to giving or acceptance of payment of other illegitimate advantages. Negligence, any act or omission which falls short of standard to be expected as the reasonable man. For a claim in negligence to succeed, it is necessary to establish that a duty of care was owed by the defendant to the claimant, that the duty was breached, and the loss fell within the defendant's scope of duty and was foreseeable consequence of breach of that duty. What is financial fraud? So application fraud is usually defined as when an individual uses their own name to apply for a financial product or uses false information or counterfeit documents in the application. Two types of fraud that can be carried out: by individuals under their own name or by someone else who has stolen their identity. Examples include identity fraud, mortgage fraud, credit and debit card fraud, fake charities, prize and lottery fraud, and debt collection fraud. Has anyone come across any sort of financial fraud situations where, you know, they've identified that it's been either one of the examples that I've given?
Yeah, somebody did to me.
Sorry, who was that? Was it Nadia?
No, you go ahead first.
I think Hadish will give you the first choice because you've had a cold and you haven't spoken much.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No.
Okay.
Have you come across that, Hadish?
Yeah, so within banking, investment fraud, can you believe this?
Yeah.
Somebody accuses an employee of contacting an individual claiming that they should invest in a product. The product doesn't exist. They give the individual potential customer details of a bank account, claiming that it's an escrow account. So therefore it's not within the bank itself. It will be held separately. And then this individual comes to the bank a year later and claims a particular employee has given them their advice and there's no communication and they've lost their money and they haven't heard it. And as a result, compliance and the risk team investigate and find that the individual themselves is a fraudster.
I think for me, if I was in the accountancy profession, I think these kind of things, because I teach law as well as a little bit of accountancy, I think it'd be so interesting for me to kind of deal with these, and because there's also a different element of, you know, what the person's done, how you could identify that something. So it's quite an interesting area of, you know, to kind of look into is fraud, financial fraud especially.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, March, the amount of applications that were made to the bank was 10 times more, and they were a majority were fraudulent. So these
is it then business loans that people took on?
Both secured and unsecured loans.
Yeah.
And these individuals or corporates didn't exist at all. Some of the individuals been deceased for more than 10 years. It's only because of KYC processes and policy and the technology available and the partners that were outsourced to help us, like Thomson Reuters, that they were able to identify these fraudsters.
Yeah, but Hanish, a lot of the unsecured and secured loans that were paid out, people didn't use them for their businesses, they used them for their personal gain. And it was identified that they will eventually have to pay them back. Because the government introduced that, didn't they?
Yeah. Some of them were from overseas and they supplied a bank account. The minute that bank account fund was financed by the bank, they then they managed to cipher off the funds within seconds, not minutes, within seconds, to other accounts, and then from their other accounts. And Barclays have come across these situations many times, and they're still having difficulty to trace them after 2020, since the pandemic.
Yeah, since 2020, since all the introduction of government grants and things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, it has got two sides to it, right? Meaning, Shazia, one was ethical kind of behavior from those applying for these loans, right?
Yeah.
Second, from other angle, and how these different rules and regulations kind of, interact with each other. From banks' perspective, right? Conflict of interest, because it was government backed. So technically they are guaranteed if there is a delinquency, bank will still be made whole, right? So bank's interest was write as many loans as they can, right? I'm not saying right or wrong, but again, there was a conflict of interest. Per angle, and then being government backed was kind of almost risk-free money. So
it was
therefore the underwriting criteria was a lot lower than what they ordinarily apply.
And there has been issues of, because the whole point of the grants and the loans were to be spent on your business.
Totally. So that's where ethical behavior and somewhat criminal could also come in.
I will tell you something. In Bradford, most people bought cars. So
I'm not surprised.
Even when they were not part of the business, Bradford was inundated with new cars. So
Bentleys all over Bradford.
So it's a bit difficult to kind of, Sometimes, and I will say this, and I teach government policy about our government in this country is does not know what they are doing sometimes.
Well,
but clearly didn't during pandemic.
And I don't know if people will agree with me or not, but that's my perception.
Yeah. So Shazia and everybody also, furlough was meant to pay for those on leave from work.
Yeah.
And companies were paying furlough to those individual staff, but then the individual staff were doing other jobs and getting paid second or third jobs whilst they were not working in their main job.
People were doing cash in hand jobs and things. Yeah.
So it wasn't ethical at all in that sense.
No.
So, easy money, but for those who are very innovative in their thinking, not moral or ethical.
And that's my perception of the government is quite let's not go down that route because that could take all day, but I have they're very unethical in what they do as well. So it's one, if we, like we said, it comes from the top, but if we have unethical government, then people are gonna just kind of follow that, and that happens in a lot of countries. So what is corruption?
Again, sometimes it's not the intention, but conflict comes in, right? Meaning, and that's kind of one of the challenges. To say it softly.
I think in this country, I was teaching government policy yesterday, and I think in this country, and my students agreed with it, we've not had a good prime minister for years.
For
and
a long
we've
time.
not had a
Agreed.
good prime minister that is able to make decisions based on the public, us lot,
Right.
And I think that's the big thing at the moment, which I think people are upset about, and I think that causes a lot of conflicts, and that's what it's causing, and there's loads of issues around it. And I think we've never ever, well, to this day, I've known only probably one prime minister that was good, but was strong as a leader, the first female prime minister, Margaret Thatcher. But I think she was strong as a leader, and the ones we've had have made bad decisions for the country. And I would say that because I teach politics and stuff, but I think because of it, I think as a society, these things happen. So corruption is bribery and other behaviour in relation to persons entrusted with responsibilities in the public or private sector, which violates their duties and is aimed at obtaining undue advantages of any kind for themselves or for others. The forms of corruption are bribery, embezzlement, fraud, and extortion. Examples include, but are not limited to, bribery, including excessive hospitality. Firms are allowed to provide hospitality, promotional or other business expenditure, for example, to provide tickets to sporting events, taking clients to dinners, offer gifts to clients as a reflection of good relations, or pay for reasonable travel expenses. Do you think, again, we're going back to members of the party, MEPs and prime ministers, do you think this boils down to MP expenses as well?
Yes, ethical standards, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, there's loads of issues where MPs' expenses they've paid for an extra house rent, they've paid for TV,
second houses, claiming
70-inch TVs, whatever they want, and that's unethical because it's taxpayers' money.
Yes, totally.
However, when hospitality is really a cover for bribing someone, the authorities would look at such things as the level of hospitality offered, the way in which it was provided, and the level of influence the person receiving it had on the business decision in question. Facilitation payments are additional payments to induce officials to perform routine functions they are otherwise obligated to perform. For example, additional payments to customs officials so they prioritize processing the import of goods. The distinction between facilitation and bribes is not always clear. Some countries, like the UK and Germany, criminalize facilitation payments abroad. Other countries, such as America, do not prohibit such payments abroad and have no upper limit for them, although only very low amounts of money would be regarded as facilitation payments rather than outright bribery. buying votes, illicit payments to political parties, misappropriation of public funds are all examples of corruption and bribery, as we mentioned, and I think MP expenses fall within that as well. Corruption and bribery. What is bribery? So the offering, promising, giving, accepting, or soliciting of an advantage as an inducement for an action which is illegal, unethical, or a breach of trust. Corruption is now recognized to be one of the world's greatest challenges. For example, KPMG surveyed FTSE 100 companies in August 2009 and found that 2/3 said it was not possible to do business in countries without being involved in bribery and corruption. Yet only 35% had stopped doing business there. The World Bank has stated that bribery has become a 1 trillion industry. Why do you think that there's such an increase in bribery and corruption? Is it that people think they can get away with it? That's why they do it.
One is exactly getting away with it. Absolutely. Yeah. And, lower ethical standards. That's another one, right? Conflict of interest is another one.
Yeah.
Meaning you quoted KPMG study. KPMG themselves is kind of one of the most sinister big four who has been regularly caught up in, kind of these kind of issues with expenses and stuff with the partners.
And just to add, technology as well is so advanced that they're able to hide behind the screen.
Yeah, they are able to. Yes, it's so true. It's quite shocking that we live in a society where it's still happening and happening quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Again, there are sectors that are moving differently. Meaning, I give you an example from banking, financial services. 10 years ago, I was used to be invited to all these big galas and, the Wimbledons and this and that.
Yeah.
Right? Now, neither you can take somebody else or somebody else can take you. If I have to have a dinner with a big four partner, I have to pay mine and he has to pay his, or he or she has to pay his. We can't pay for each other. So there are sectors that have moved quite a bit, in terms of going, the barriers are very high, guardrails are there. There are other sectors who haven't followed similar stringent rules. Again, I think it's, and that's where the government policies needs to, be more balanced, come in, right? It shouldn't be one sector doing all and others don't.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, there needs a balance between all sectors.
Yes.
The accountancy profession. So the UK accountancy profession is largely self-regulatory, with the accountancy bodies responsible for setting and upholding the ethical standards for their members. In the UK, the FRAC, which is the Financial Reporting Council, regulates the accountancy and professionals. It aims to promote ethical financial reporting. The responsibilities of the FRC include issuing standards for corporate governance and corporate reporting, audit and assurance. The FRC monitors and enforces compliance with regulations and standards. Any non-compliance can result in disciplinary action. Members are seen to be acting professionally or literally having professionalism. Professionalism may also be interpreted more as a state of mind, while the profession provides the rules that members of that profession must follow. Professional behaviour imposes an obligation on members to comply with relevant laws and regulations and avoid any action that may bring discredit to the profession. Professional behaviour will mean complying with ethical standards laid down by a professional body. Over time, the profession appears to be taking more of a proactive rather than a reactive approach. The accounting profession approaches. So you have the reactive approach and the proactive approach. Reactive approach is taking responsibility for any negative consequences of accounting practice and, where appropriate, amending these practices to remove the consequences. And an example, accounting practice failed to identify the risk that special purpose entities established by ERON to hide its debt may not actually incorporate into ERON's main accounts. A proactive approach is seeking out and positively contributing to the public interest. And an example that would be the accounting profession recognises that guidance on how to carry out environmental audit or to accumulate appropriate metrics to include within an environmental audit is not available. What is public interest? The public interest can be defined as that which supports the good of society as a whole, opposed to what serves the interests of individual members. For an accountant, acting in the public interest is acting for the collective well-being of the community of people and institution it serves. There's much debate over definition of the term public interest. However, public interest is normally seen to refer to the common well-being or general welfare. And action is usually thought to be in the public interest where it benefits society in some way. It is unclear, though, how many members of society must benefit before the action can be declared to be in public interest. 3.3. Explain offences and penalties related to money laundering. So money laundering, as we said, is a process earlier by which proceeds of crime and true ownership of proceeds are changed so that proceeds appear to come from a legitimate source. It is statutorily defined as an act which constitutes an offence under the Proceeds of Crime Act 2002. Criminal property includes proceeds of tax evasion, benefits obtained through bribery and corruption, and benefits from failure to comply with regulatory requirements. Terrorism is the use of threat action designed to influence government or to intimidate any section of the public or to advance a political, religious, or ideological cause where the action would involve threats to health and safety, damage to property, or disruption of electronic systems. The Proceeds of Crime Act 2002 is in regards to concealing, distinguishing, converting, transferring, or removal of criminal activity, which is section 327, taking in an arrangement to facilitate the acquisition, use of criminal property, section 328, and acquiring, using, or possessing criminal property, section 329. And these, it's interesting to identify that, you know, money laundering does not just happen with smaller firms or smaller organizations. It's quite the bigger ones as well that are involved in this, in tax evasion. What do you think? Do you think it's the smaller organizations and businesses that do more of this, or do you think it's the large ones?
If you look at the amount of fines that European banks have been imposed by SEC in US, it's billions of dollars of fines. And imagine if the fine is $1 billion, what is the size of the bribe? What is the size of the
organization? Yeah.
So all these big banks, unfortunately, has had issues. Deutsche and Standard Chartered and all these guys.
Offences under POCA. We refer to it as POCA when I'm teaching law. It's because it Proceeds of Crimes Act, where they are, you know, if they've suspected anything or any sort of tipping off, you know, they are, for money laundering, there are sentences in place: 14 years for money laundering, tipping off 5 years, failure to disclose knowledge or suspicion of money laundering, 5 years. The sentence: authorized disclosures made by money laundering, whereas protected disclosures made by someone who knows or suspects another of money laundering. And the maximum sentence is quite high for that, isn't it? Where you kind of, you know, if they are unable to get the finances back off you in the money, what do they do? Do they take your property and things like that?
Yeah, of course, it's confiscated.
Yeah, within POCA, they will take your property or any other assets that you have. Fraudulent behaviour. Fraudulent behaviour is defined as intentional deception designed for either personal gain. Fraudulent behaviour constitutes criminal activity and can lead to significant consequences, again, including prison. There are many types of fraudulent behaviour connected to companies, inside dealing, which Irene, you mentioned about the person doing it inside the company, an individual, market abuse, money laundering, bribery, fraudulent wrongful trading, criminal activity in the management of companies. Does that happen a lot? Criminal activity in the management of the companies?
Yes, it does. Fairly, right? Insider trading is all over the place on FT, even more recently.
Yeah. I think it does happen quite a lot within companies itself. It doesn't necessarily mean that the criminal activity could be undertaken by an individual. It could be the management, you know, of the company that are committing this kind of criminal activity.
I've experienced it.
Oh, have you? Excellent.
Yeah.
Not excellent like that, but yeah.
No, but it's only when that person who was a treasury manager of this large international organization was on leave at the London office that the auditors decided to carry out the reconciliations, just look into it. And they found that the check that was showing as outstanding item had been cleared into the personal account of the Treasury manager.
Oh, okay.
So when that person returned from their vacation, they were obviously interviewed and scrutinized, and lies upon lies upon lies. But the evidence
They must have had a good vacation, a very expensive vacation.
yeah, it was a very large amount. But
Remember,
it just shows you that large organizations, even Santander, had a manager working there. I'm talking about a decade ago, where they siphoned off funds by doing false applications for loans, and these individual customers did not exist. And even now, Santander got fined by the regulators for money laundering.
Meaning, remember Wirecard, sorry to cut you off, Wirecard, right? There was €2 billion of cash went missing, right? That was like the biggest fraud in Germany, and not so far away, like $2 billion cash went missing. Because people used to take cash in sacks from the office.
This is quite an interesting area for me, and quite passionate to my heart. I don't know why. I just like the sort of, not like it. I just think it's quite interesting to look at the fraudulent side, and money laundering and bribery and things like that, because it's quite close to my heart, because I teach law, you see. So I think it's quite interesting to know how you, as people in the accountancy profession, have actually identified things like that or experienced things. So it's quite interesting for me to listen to your stories.
And the other thing is, there is no materiality in this one, right? Meaning, we're talking about $2 billion missing, right? And then there was recently a guy fired by Citi for claiming $15 or €15 worth of expenses that was for his wife, and then claiming that he ate 2 sandwiches and had 2 coffees and stuff like that. So that was wrongful, kind of. So yes, there's very little tolerance for this.
One more case study to add. It's not just within financial services we're seeing. Even Specsavers were committing VAT fraud. HMRC said that their services they provide, they were supposed to disclose £16 million of unpaid VAT back to, and they managed to renegotiate that and bring it down to 5 million. And it was the incompetence of head office at Guernsey. The staff there were the ones who were doing the administration, but they penalised the store managers in England by taking away the VAT missing amounts from their profits. So where's the justice?
That's not fair, though, is it?
Isn't fair. And I was working at the store. So during that time when I saw this, I told the store manager, look, you need to have a group action against this. But they were scared, and none of this was in the news either. So again, when you come across these things in your career, you realize, where is the justice? Where's the ethics? Because big corporations, they're so complicated because they're connected. Their network has so much influence and also persuasion with the regulators that they get away with it.
Yeah, it's so true. It's interesting, though. There are a number of criminal offences that could be undertaken by individuals concerned in the operation, management, or winding of a company. Failure to file accounts or annual returns, failure to deliver accounts or annual returns on time is a criminal offence. All the directors of the company in default can be prosecuted. Providing misleading information to an auditor, and under Section 499 of the Companies Act 2006, an auditor is entitled to require from the company's officers and employees such information and explanation as he thinks necessary for the performance of his duties as an auditor. It is a criminal offence for an officer of the company to provide misleading, false, or deceptive information or explanations, or fail to provide information or explanations required by that auditor. Business name under Section 82 Companies Act 2006, it is a criminal offence to use a business name that requires prior approval. If that approval has not been obtained, it is a criminal offence to fail to disclose the business details that the Act requires. These details include stating the company's corporate name and address for the service of the documents, and that's under the Company's Directors Disqualification Act 1986. Under Section 13, any person who acts in contravention of disqualification order is guilty of an offence, and the maximum penalty is 2 years imprisonment or a fine, or conviction on indictment, or up to 6 months imprisonment, a fine not exceeding the statutory maximum on summary conviction. Phoenix companies, so Section 216 and 217 Insolvency Act 1986 are aimed at so-called Phoenix companies. They apply where a person is a director or shadow director of a company at a time in the period of 12 months ending with the day of the company went into liquidation. The provisions apply for 5 years following liquidation. They prevent the person being a director of a company with a similar name or a name which suggests an association with a previous company without leave of the court. It is a criminal offence to contravene the provisions, punishable by imprisonment or a fine. 3.4, explain offences and penalties related to computer misuse and cybercrime, and that's a big concern with all the AI stuff as well. The Computer Misuse Act, CMA 1990, is a key piece of legislation that criminalises the act of accessing or modifying data stored on a computer without appropriate consent or permission. The Computer Misuse Act 1990 is UK's legal defence against hacking, allowing the state to prosecute those who use to access computers for malicious purposes. The offences are unauthorised access to computer material, unauthorised access to intent to commit or facilitate commission of further offences, and unauthorised access with intent to impair or with recklessness as to impairing operation of computer. The Fraud Act 2006 has radically changed the law of criminal fraud. Before the Fraud Act came into force, the statutory offences under the Theft Act 1978 were based on deception. They included obtaining property by deception, obtaining a money transfer by deception, obtaining a pecuniary advantage by deception, and obtaining a services by deception. The Fraud Act swept all the old statutory deception offences. Instead, a new offence of fraud was defined. So firstly, the defendant must have been dishonest and not intended to make a gain or to gain a loss to another, and the defendant must carry out one of the acts: making a false or misleading representation, this being where any person makes any representation as to the fact or law express or implied which they know to be untrue or misleading. Failing to disclose information, whereby a person fails to disclose any information to a third party when they are under legal duty to disclose such information. An abuse of position, where a person accompanies a position where they're expected to safeguard the financial interests of another and abuses that position. Maintaining professional independence. Accountants must maintain independence from their clients. An accountant should avoid bias, conflict of interest, and undue influence of others. So your own strength of character and professionalism, your awareness of legal accountability and penalties, your awareness of professional accountability and disciplinary action, and your awareness of potential negative impact on your professional reputation. Maintaining professional independence. A financial interest is an interest in shares, equity, or other security, debenture, loan, or other debt instrument of an entity, including rights and obligations to acquire such an interest and derivates directly related to such interest. Financial interest can be direct or indirect. Direct interest is owned directly by or under the control of an individual or an entity, beneficially owned through a collective investment vehicle, estate, trust, or other intermediary over which the individual or entity has control. An indirect financial interest is beneficially owned through a collective investment vehicle, estate, trust, or other intermediary over which the individual or entity has no control. Maintaining professional independence. Gifts, hospitalities, and inducement. These may be offered to work colleagues, clients, or other parties such as contractor or supplier. You might also offer gifts, favours, or hospitality. There's significant threat to objectivity and confidentiality, and the threat is self-interest and intimidation. Possible safeguards are inform senior management of those charged with governance, inform third parties such as professional bodies, and advise close or personal relationships to associates of possible threats and safeguards. The gift needs to be significant enough that it could be reasonably perceived by a person who has all facts as likely to influence your judgment. What do you think that means? The gift needs to be significant enough that it could be reasonably perceived by a person who has all the facts as likely to influence your judgment.
Yeah, I think that's...
What do you think that means?
Well, that means, you know, trivial, you know, you're buying somebody a coffee of like £2.50 versus, you know, kind of having a lunch at Ritz. I think that's what they're talking about here.
And
again,
they're trying to change
limits.
to change your perception or your judgment by doing this.
Correct. As I cited, right, meaning before Briberies Act came up.
But some people may think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people may think that's a good thing.
Yeah, remember, and also in different parts of the world, it is still very much acceptable. You got to do this.
It is acceptable. Yeah, you're right.
To win a business contract.
Yeah.
So, you know, it varies very well in the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
it is a good thing for them.
You've just said, which in some parts of the country, different parts of the different countries, they are willing to do that because it's acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
The Bribery Act 2010. I will give you an example of a country that does that. Sometimes Pakistan is one where things like that will occur, and it will, you know, the fact that someone's taking someone out is a way of, you know, bribery and things. You know, most countries around that kind of areas will, you know.
I used to think
it's not.
Sorry? Yes, I used to think, you know, when we have these discussions on these topics, you know, I think at first the first countries, all these other developing countries, not the Western worlds, seem to be the first that comes to mind. But if you've lived here enough and you've worked in all these corporate organization and all that, you know that there's just no need to look outside, you know. We look within ourselves.
Yes.
It's amazing. I work in the NHS, and you know, it's absolutely ridiculous what you know goes on. It's quite clear.
More here.
It happens right here. It happens under our nose, you know.
Yes.
Whether it's in America or it's in the UK, it does. I originally came from Nigeria. And of course, you know, those are the countries you consider as countries that are quite corrupt. But these things happen at a very large scale. Just imagine the PP issues, you know, during the COVID era. Who were the contracts given? All these contracts, and you see directors moving from one place. He says, "Scratch my back, I scratch your back, you scratch my back."
Yes,
it's ridiculous. I can't go on. I can't go on what goes on. But it's and it's an absolute waste of our taxpayers' money. Where this is being recorded, so I think I have to stop here. Thank you.
No, it does happen. Totally, I agree with you. It does happen within the country. The only thing is, when Irene, it happens in third country nationals, it's prominent. It's there. Okay, here, it's more hidden. Okay, so sometimes it happens, but it's more hidden. But the perception is that it does happen in every country. You know, the fact is that it does happen, and people do different ways. I know I worked with I've got lots of Nigerian friends, I've got lots of Pakistani friends, Indian friends, and I've also got lots of friends. I dealt with lots of clients from Zimbabwe, and I did see the perception of how it was there as well. And Pakistan is quite prominent. They do it in front of you, whereas in here it's quite hidden. It does happen, but it's very hidden. So the Bribery Act 2010 occurs where a person offers, gives or promises to give financial or other advantage to another individual in exchange for improperly performing a relevant function or an act. Being bribed is requesting, accepting or agreeing to receive an advantage in exchange for improperly performing such a function. What is financial or other advantage? Contracts, non-monetary gifts, or offers of employment. And you know, in any profession, you are given gifts, but not in the way when it comes to bribery and corruption. Acting with sufficient expertise. The fundamental principle of professional competence and due care means an accountant shall only carry out work where they have sufficient training or experience. They shall take care to not mislead an employer about their experience and expertise. They should seek appropriate expert advice and assistance whence required. The potential threat cites time pressure, insufficient or inaccurate information, lack of resources, lack of experience and knowledge or training. The possible safeguards are to obtain additional advice or training, ensure you have enough time, get help from someone with relevant knowledge, and consult with superiors, independent experts, or relevant professional bodies. Oh, we've got, I don't even know what time it is. Oh my God, we've gone over the time because we've been so interested in talking about examples and stuff. So we've only got about 7 or 8 slides. Is that okay if I carry on with everyone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this session is the only session that I have that gets quite heated up and we have more discussion. So it's a good thing. I'd expect that normally to have discussion. It helps. Policies for handling clients' money. Why is it important to have policies in place to, you know, safeguard clients' money and have like client accounts? Why do you think that's so important?
Because that would be kind of a rule. What should we do and what we should not do?
Yeah. It shouldn't go into like the business account or anything like that. It should go into a separate client's account to identify that this money has come from a client. Client monies are funds or form of documents or title to money or documents of title which can be converted into money that a member in practice holds on behalf of the client. They do not include fees for work done or fees paid in advance to work done or use of any sort of control of the client's own bank account. Accountants must take custody of their client's money or other assets unless they are permitted to do so by law. Example of client's money: refunds from HMRC received on behalf of the client, funds entrusted to a member in practice to assist in carrying out the client's instructions, and surplus funds that fall at the end of an engagement. Policies for handling clients' cash. Handling clients' money leads to self-interest threats to professional behaviour and objectivity. So the policy guidelines are there must be a separation. Clients' money should be kept separately from monies belonging to you personally or to the practice. The use of that is clients' money should be used only for the purpose of which they are intended. And the accountability, you must be ready at all times to account for the monies to authorised enquiries. So when not to hold clients' money. The Fraud Act 2006, offences is fraud by false representation, Section 2, fraud by failing to disclose information, Section 3, and fraud by abuse of position, Section 4. When not to hold clients' money. So there are monies of investment business clients and you are not regulated. There's reason to believe they are criminal property, like Violetta said earlier, money laundering or drugs money or anything like that. There's no justification for holding the money, and there's a condition on your license or registration that prohibits you from dealing with clients' money. Confidentiality and disclosure. Confidentiality, what is that? Information shared with the explicit provision that it be kept private and confidential. Information shared within a professional client relationship. Information that is restricted or classified with an organization information system. Information protected by data protection and personal privacy law, and information that could be used against the interests of the organization or the individual. The Data Protection Act 1998 gives individuals rights to know what information is held about them. A data controller must comply with its principle, and the Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, has legal powers to ensure compliance with the Act. Notification is a statutory requirement, involves a data controller giving the ICO details about processing of personal information, and failure to notify this is a criminal offence. Confidentiality is one of the fundamental ethical principles and applies even after the assignment is over, and applies to any staff under the authority or anyone you ask for advice or assistance. circumstances when you disclose confidential information, when you are properly authorized to do so. So you must have authority to do that. When you have professional duty or right to do so, and when you have a legal duty to do so. So some further reading that you could do. So we finished learning outcome 3 now. This is some further reading that is on Moodle, but you can also link on here. Knowledge Bank, Kaplan, Ethics and Governance, and any sort of questions or anything you need to ask, you need to be emailing. Again, the link is there, learnerwork@UK Varsity, and then it's just identified that any sort of submission of the assignment is after you finish the last learning outcome, which is tomorrow. Has anyone got any questions before we finish the session?
Sorry, so tomorrow is the session, and after that is 2 weeks given to provide the work?
You've got, let me just check on my, I think we have a session tomorrow, don't we? I'm sure we do.
Yeah.
We've got a session tomorrow, which is, I've got business.
Yeah, we have a session tomorrow.
We do have one tomorrow, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. We have a session tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then we've got
another one on Saturday, next Saturday.
Next Saturday, and that's the assignment discussion.
Okay. And after that,
so that will be
2 weeks.
That will be your last session then with me.
Okay. And after then, that last session, next Saturday, we've got 2 weeks to complete the assignment.
Yeah, assignment. Yeah. You've got 2 weeks. So we go through the assignment session. What I might do next week is go through a summary, if you all want, of learning outcome 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we carry on with the assignment session. So it's a bit fresh in your head then. Is that okay?
Yes.
Sounds good.
So I will see you lot next week. Has anyone got any questions or anything?
Well, you're seeing us tomorrow, not next week, but yes, no questions.
Oh, sorry. I'm seeing you tomorrow. Sorry. No joke. I will see you tomorrow. Has anyone got any questions about today's session or anything?
No.
No, thank you.
Thank you for your patience, and I will see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope you get better, Hannah.